Hemshech Hayim Beis, Volume 1. We're up to chapter 178 on page 363. We're in the middle of the discourse Akev, actually coming to the end of it. 178, which is Maimer Discourse 44. Akev Tofrei Shayin Gimel. And we're in the middle of discussing the triangle, the triad between Kudsha B'richu, Yisrael, and Neraisa. God, souls, and Torah. And this is all in the context of understanding two dimensions in Torah, which is like the two elements of the interface that we learned earlier, the two dimensions in Ak, Pnimius Ak, Chetzenius Ak. One is the klal of Torah, the all-encompassing vision of Torah, that represents more being the God's Torah, manifesting God's wisdom and will. And then there's the Torah as it relates to us, existence, to a human being. So as he said, Mi'ikara, when a person begins, Ki Ovid Inish Adaitiv de Nafshe Ovid. And this is how the Torah affects us. We spoke about Dovid HaMelech, Zmiris Hayalichu Kecha, Li. That it was about how it impacted him. And that was why he was punished, because there's the other dimension of Torah, Shashuim Lefanov. Etzlei Omen. Etzlei. So we have the two dimensions of Torah, and we spoke about it first from a divine perspective, that there's a divine, how it's a divine delight, and then how it relates to existence, and then we spoke about it in the Veda, how we learn Torah. We begin by learning how it affects and helps us, and we climb the ladder to come to appreciate that it's God's expression. So we're having pleasure, as he said, the Eved that has pleasure in God's pleasure. Not in what we benefit from it, but what God is getting from it. Or what the Torah is getting from it. As he spoke, that there's the Torah, limit that Torah, in other words, how Torah impacts us. And then there's the study of Torah for the sake of bringing Lishma, L'Shem HaTorah, to bring Elokus, draw down godliness like David did. Was Mekasher, he bound Kudsha B'richu with Torah. Okay, so that was basically chapters 176, 175, 76. 177, he continued the theme that he started earlier with his kashus. The Lashon Zohar is Tlas Kishrin. There are three bonds, there are three knots. And he explained that Kesher immediately implies something that on its own is not bound. It's separate. Or else you don't have to bind it. Light and the source of light doesn't have to be bound. They are bound intrinsically. So there the word is dveikus, the dovuk. Kesher implies that there's two separate things. So we understood, when he explained that, he explained it back in chapter 175. Was it 175? Or even earlier? Where was it? No, it was a little later. Sorry. Yeah, it was already in Akev, I believe. Yeah, the bottom of page 356, chapter 175. So he said that his kashus, therefore, what does it suggest? So it talks about, first of all, Yisrael. Souls, the way they come down to earth, they don't come down retaining in a revealed way their connection above. It gets concealed. It gets concealed in the body and the animal soul. Torah mitzvahs, even as they come down, they still retain a mitzvah is a mitzvah. It's God's mitzvah. God's Torah. It does descend, and it's not as intense as it is in higher levels, but it retains its kedusha, so to speak. When Neshama comes down, it can be completely trapped inside of the body until we do something about it. So that's why the soul has to bind itself through Torah. The Torah lifts it back up and reveals its real connection that became concealed down on earth. The reason for that, we learned, was like the lever, because the point is to transform existence. So Birudim requires that you descend and be engaged. You can't do it from the top of a mountain. You have to be involved. So therefore, a soul, that's the hiskashus of a neshama. So that's why it's called kishin, because the soul on its own can feel separate, is detached, so to speak. So you're reconnecting it. That's the hiskashus. That's souls and through Torah, and that's how the souls connect through Torah to the Eibishter. That's how they reconnect, so to speak. Torah also has this element of kesher on a different level. Torah is chokhmah. It's manifest in wisdom. Chokhmah is not this, is detached to some extent from God's will. As he said, God is chakim v'lei b'chokhmah yediyah. So the Torah also has an element that is like a separate. And when a Yid learns Torah, when a soul learns Torah, down below, you connect the Torah, the chokhmah of Torah, back to its rotzen, back to the source, to the Neisenat Torah. So that's how he explained Kesher in chapter 175. In 177, he went 177, 1 second, let me just make sure. Yeah, 176, he continued that theme where he spoke about why a soul needs Torah, because on its own, that's where he spoke about learning Torah before davening and learning Torah after davening, that whole discussion. Because there too, a soul needs, when it wakes up in the morning, to so-called, we said, to ignite it, to get it warmed up. But then in 177, what we learned was that in Skashus, that even though, this is where it began this new discussion, even though it's a Skashus, which means it's only possible when a thing is separate, but through reconnecting, this is now the new theme here. You get to a higher place than when you were than the connection you had initially. In other words, the soul above is not disconnected. Here it's disconnected, but through reconnecting down below, you reach a higher level than you do when the connection was above. That's the theme that we're discussing now. Now, in a sense, if you remember, there was a parenthesis on the top of page 357. He spoke what his dveikus is higher than his kashrus or lower. So he spoke there that from Elmaila Lamata, his kashrus is higher because it's pnimius. And dveikus is makif. There's no effort, there's no internalization. But from the perspective from below, meaning, technically speaking, dveikus is higher because the unity is a deeper unity. So I guess this has a little connection here too, because we're going to be talking, once a soul below reconnects, it has a much more pneumistic connection, where above, it's much more natural, so to speak. It doesn't require any effort. But we didn't get there yet. So now he began a long discussion. To understand this, Yuvan, this is Kashrus, he began the discussion with the pasuk Shcheira Ani V'Nova B'nei Yerushalayim. So let's sum that up, and then we'll continue in the next chapter. This pasuk is going to teach us this message. Remember, Shcheira Ani V'Nova means I am dark and beautiful, daughters of Israel. I'm sorry, I keep saying Israel. Daughters of Jerusalem. Daughters of Jerusalem. Briefly, the pasuk, the way that the Rebbe Rashab is explaining, which is really based on the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim, is that the one who's speaking here, the soul, as it descends into the body, into this world, is speaking to the source of the soul, into B'nai Yerushalayim. So Shcheira Ani, the Ani is speaking, is the neshama that's Melubeshes Beguf, is speaking to B'nai Yerushalayim, the way the neshama is rooted in Malchus. Saying that I am dark, but beautiful. That's what's going to be the expression. Okay, so explains first what is B'nai Yerushalayim. So B'nai Yerushalayim, he says, goes on the soul, the way it's rooted in Atzilus. We say neshama shenasata b'taherihi. That's Atzilus. More specifically, Pnimius HaKelim. Because remember, we're talking already a soul that has an identity. So we're not just talking as it's purely light or energy. It's already manifesting as an identity. You probably learned this idea where Ba'leishches HaNeris, Shiva Neris al Mul Pnei HaMenera. What's the Shiva Neris HaNeris? Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. Every soul is a flame. And different souls come from different branches, as he explains in Likutei Torah. So they're neshamas that are primarily from Chesed of Atzilus. They're souls that are primarily from Bina, from Gvura, from Teferes, from Netzach, all the way through Malchus. That's the basically. However, most souls go through, as I said, like local trains, through Bria Tzirasiya, and assume properties with many, many garments and levushim. That's the regular neshamas down on earth. I say regular, I mean quote unquote, compared to a neshama, let's say, of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe, the Alter Rebbe says, as he spoke to Pari in Mitzrayim, he was a neshama d'Atzilus. Everybody's a neshama d'Atzilus, but he was Atzilus, the intensity.
No local stops.
Right, no local stop, no filters, basically. So then you say the question, so when a tzaddik says in the morning by davening, neshama shenesat b'tahirihi, and any regular person says, my soul is pure, they're saying the same thing. The truth is, because everyone's rooted in essentially in Atzilus, but the difference is, Ata barasa, ata yitzat, ata nefachtas. She'll say, what does a tzaddik do? By him is also ata barasa. So you have to say, of course it goes through those levels, but there's an expression called bederech maiver. Express train also goes through local stations, it just passes them. So you can't say, it's not just skips them completely. However, it doesn't assume their properties. That's what it is. It doesn't stop and absorb and develop that whole attitude. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason, because Neshama Atzilus of a tzaddik has to remain here a bright light. It has to be a source of inspiration and leadership. So there's a reason for that. Which has osakson. For example, in Tanya, he'll say clearly, that's not the kavanah, was not to send down souls of tzaddikim. It was to send down souls of Beinoni. Because the purpose of existence is not a neshama that bypasses all the filters and therefore doesn't have those challenges. It's someone who immerses in all those challenges, and like he said, the lever, like the crowbar, and goes in there and manifests in this world and has to struggle and elevate existence. So the purpose of existence is not the tzaddik, it's the regular soul, so to speak. But the tzaddik's purpose is to help elevate, inspire, role model, direct. It's like Torah. The role of a tzaddik is more like he's giving the directives. He's helping a generation understand its role.
Are there neshamas of Bria and Yitzira, or just Yitzira?
No. There are. Yeah, no, there are. There are neshamas that can be rooted.
Great people are like from Bria. Or
Yeah, and they bypass Yitzira. Yeah.
You hear about that?
You do.
Bria. Wow.
Right. He's right. Exactly.
Wow.
The others are Merkava. Yeah. The Shvat. Tanoim sometimes Merayim could be Yitzira. There's different levels.
Wow.
Sometimes the Arizal. They talk about the Arizal, not necessarily Atzilus. They talk sometimes the Arizal. Well, not necessarily the Neshama Arizal could be higher, but his Asaga, they said, was not Atzilus. Like for example, a Navi sees in Bria, but he doesn't have sees in Atzilus. The Asaga, that's why Chacham Adif Menavi. Because the wisdom of the Arizal, we call him more of a Chacham. We don't call Arizal a Navi. Even though I'm sure he had Ruach HaKodesh and all that, but a prophet is a lower level, but he sees it. Sometimes you could have comprehension of a higher level, but not see it. I mean, there's a lot of levels here. Remember, we learned about Eliyahu. There's Man and there's Ban, and there's Ban of Ma. The bottom line is that I mentioned the example a few days ago about the cave. We need many different individuals and their strengths to refine this world. Just like in any business, you need to have the conceiver, you need the implementer, you need the people who do the work. You need like Yisachar and Zvulun. So it's not a surprise. This is different roles that different souls play in the scheme of things to make it happen.
But Moshe Rabbeinu is including everything.
Adam Arishan is really the biggest includer of everything, because he's like Adam Arishan is as Ak. Moshe is Neshama Vatzil is Ma, Neshama of Ma. He's the purest example of of a soul that is in its purest form of Atzilus. In that sense, that's why he's not Aaron. His role was not what Aaron did. Aaron did other things. Moshe didn't do everything.
But he's the Rebbe. He's the source for everything.
Okay, but then what's the role of Aaron HaKohen Gadol? He has a different role. I mean, it's not... That's not about the source. There's another thing. The Neshama Klal is that everything travels through him. Yeah, fine. But the bottom line is, till Miriam and Aaron didn't pass away, because them was the Onan and the Mayim. And then Moshe replaced that. It was in the schus of Moshe. This doesn't take away. This is different roles. The Mashiach will come. There'll still be a Kohen Gadol in the Beis Hamikdash doing his job. Bottom line is many jobs. There's functions. Let's just go back here. 1 second. So now we're talking Neshamas, all Neshamas of Atzilus. Now, that's called, why is it called Bnei Yerushalayim? She explains it two ways, because Yerushalayim is Malchus. So Malchus, that's where the primary Kalim are. And that's when the Neshama begins to assume its true property of being a soul, a distinct soul that's ready to descend into earth. So think of it like he said the example of gestation, or pregnancy. Before pregnancy, a soul, let's talk about a body first. Before pregnancy, there's also the identity of a person, but it's so vague and abstract. Once a seed is fertilized, once an egg is fertilized and becomes a growing fetus, right? So that state of pregnancy is beginning to shape. What is it in spiritual levels, that pregnancy? Same thing with neshamas. Neshamas are rooted in very high places. When neshamas begin to ready to descend below, God's chosen soul, your soul, my soul, to go down, what's the process? So he doesn't go through specifics, but I'm just elaborating. The process is, that neshama, let's say it comes from chesed of Atzilus. That neshama now is going to be impregnated, so to speak. I mean, we don't mean in a physical way, we mean that it goes through Zah, and Zah is Mashpia in Malchus. And then the soul will spend time in Malchus developing its first stages of being able to adapt to a world in which it's going to come down to. As a matter of fact, in some places it says that the 9 months of pregnancy correspond to the 9 spheres of Atzilus, of Malchus. And then birth is when it emerges. So the 9 spheres is the 9 months. What's happening? So the physical body, in the mother's body, in the womb, the body is developing, being fed and nurtured and being developed into becoming a body that's going to come out into this world and be able to live on a physiological level. What's happening spiritually? In Malchus, it's learning the trade of having to deal with a world that's very far from Elokus. So Malchus is still Elokus. Malchus is the mother's womb. It's still within, Uber Chimay. So it's still within the mother. In this case, it's still the Malchus of Atzilus, but it's already being prepared to become a separate entity. So Malchus is where Malchus itself is an interface between still Atzilus, but it's the lowest level of Atzilus. Malchus will become Kesser of Biyah. Same thing, Malchus will produce a child, a soul, which will now enter into Bri Yitzir Asiyah. Now, obviously, if to think there not in terms of 9 months as in time, it's 9 levels of work, conceptual levels. So,
the first 9 until Malchus.
Yeah, the pashtus.
First one. Oh.
That's what it says in the...
And a 7 month skips...
I guess the case talks about it several places.
So to Malchus?
From Shmini
I don't
Atzilus
know, but Moshe Rabbeinu was a 7 month child. Eliyahu was a 12 month child or something like that.
Okay, anyway, so I'm just summing up chapter 177. So he says like this. I'm explaining the line we learned. The Rebbe Rashab explains why is it called Yerushalayim. So he says because it's now already in a state of mitzias. No, in other words, if there's not even a pregnancy, I'm talking now. I'm using the physical example. Remember, I'm using ibur. If you don't even have the conception of this, the conceiving, then you can't even talk about an entity. There's no entity. Here you're talking about an entity that's already something to talk about. That's why he says you can call it Yira. It's used over the Shaykh Ba'in Yira. Because Yira is not possible. So he continues. He says, so if everything is all absorbed in the divine, how do you talk about Av and Yira? So he says primarily he's talking about Malchus. Because Malchus already has, in other words, let's put it this way. It says the Mittler Rebbe, I believe, writes, why does a baby cry when it's born? So they say it's because to grab, to get its first gasp of oxygen. And now I think the Mittler Rebbe says because the baby's seeing the world it's leaving and the world it's going into. So it cries.
Leaving?
Yeah. It's leaving a very pure world. It's like the last door, the door closes. It's opening a door to a world. It looks over this world and it's Achim Vei. Why would I want to be here? Al Kochachatachai. It sees what's coming. The 9 months prepared it. You know, that's mashbiya neiseti tzadik balti rasha. We learn mashbiyin from the word masbiya. It says it's fed, nurtured, etc. Right, learning kol hatera kula. Exactly. What's happening in the 9 months is, besides the physiological development of a soul, of a body slowly developing to becoming a full body and ready to be born. So you can imagine, even a newborn child is so pure. Imagine what it's like in pregnancy, even pure. So same thing psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually, the child is also being prepared. And it's being infused, you could say downloaded into it, the tools it will need to deal with the struggles of this world. Yeah, even you. Okay. Now, here's the story. So there's an interesting parallel here. Within the mother's womb, the child is closer to what it looks like outside of the womb, especially in the later stages. If you talk about what this soul is like before it even enters even into the first cell that's split at the moment of conception, we can't even talk about it, because it's like a soul that hasn't yet touched the physicality. So there's some magic that happens, some miracle that happens when God says, husband and wife come together, one flesh, in a sanctified way. God says, if it's done right, I will be the third partner, and I'll put a soul there too. And this is something that still mystifies everybody, what exactly happens. You know, something happens at that moment, and we know it's 3 things happening. It's a seed, an egg, a seed, male and female, and then there's a third partner, soul. So we're not getting into now that moment of where it all meets. But once that meets, there's some meeting point, even if it's just minuscule, you know, because it's like even the follicle of a hair at that point, and it's so small. But that begins where everything starts developing. The seed has now been planted. So now it begins to develop. So now it's beginning to get a mitzias. Why did God make it this way? He could have just said, pop, Adam and Chava, they just came 20 years old, they were adults. We'd be much more efficient. Imagine, no tzar gidul banim. We didn't have to worry about bringing up our children. No chinuch expenses. You know, no concerns with where's your child, are they crossing the street alone, etc., God forbid, you know. It would have been a lot simpler. However, it would not be with any avodah. It wouldn't be with any, it would be like magic. Pop, people are born. The whole idea of Shtei Shtalshus we've been learning again and again is that there's an interface. God wants us to integrate it within us. If He just came at 20 years old, you have Kol HaTorah Kula inside of you. No, there's a process of education. You have to learn everything from scratch, aleph beis, then words, and so on. You learned the whole Torah inside your mother's womb. That gave you power. But consciously, you have to go through the process because you have to own it. If you want to dirbe tachtenim, it has to be internalized. There's only one way, and that is through our work, step by step by step. That's why Matan Torah wasn't given at the beginning of creation. Same thing. You had to go through a chinuch, a preparation, that people would have earned it on their own. And it wasn't easy. First there were 10 generations that were machisin, it was very difficult, till Avram came. So everything is a process. Mashiach, of course God could send Mashiach, but He wants us to be partners in it, and He wants, more importantly, to be owned by us. What's the kunz if God just sends a gili Mamayla lamata? From time to time we want that and need that to get us inspired, but the point is that it has to be yours, or else the whole point of creation is lost. So there's a process, everything is a process. So there's also a process within pregnancy, and there's a process in Atzilus, how Neshama ends up gestating in Malchus, and there you could say Yira and Ava. It's still Atzilus, but now it's Atzilus, it's like the fetus inside Atzilus. Verstehst? So Atzilus itself, you can't say Aviyir. He says in Esther readers themselves, we say Aviyir is only Moti v'loi Moti. It's more like 2 Tnuas. But in Malchus, you can actually say, with the main Kalim are there, you could say there's an union of Rotzei. Why? Because the child that's in the mother's womb can already be yearning to be to the place it was before it entered into this state. Verstehst? So in Malchus, you already have a state where you can say Ava v'Yira, or it says Yira. That's why it's called Yerushalayim. B'nai Yerushalayim. The daughters of Yerushalayim, which means the souls of Malchus, basically. So That's explanation number one. Okay? And remember, this is still not Shcheirani. Shcheirani is how the soul is below, speaking to the soul as it's in Malchus. Explanation one. Gam Yeshleimer. I'm not reading everything, I'm just going over the chapter a little more in depth. Everybody with me? Yeah, I'm just I'm just summing up because we read it relatively quickly and it was just a little dense, but no, it's not that complicated, by the way. When we read it inside, it sounded complicated. It's not as complicated as you think. See, so far, so good, right? Okay. Gam Yeshleimer. Then comes the second Yeshleimer. Could also say that Kavanah al Neshama is the ban. That the Kavanah of Bnei Shalayim is now he's introducing a new expression. Neshamas of ban. This is not a contradiction. He's giving two explanations of Bnei Shalayim. This is common as we've been learning in Ayin Beis. He often takes something and explains. It could be on this level, it could be that. Neshama is the ban. What's Neshamas of ban? So that I explained. I'll just say briefly. The Kiddush yes, Neshama is the ban, Neshama is the ban. There are two categories of souls. Classic Ma is Moshe. Classic Ban is usually Eliyahu. Even though he says it's Ban of Ma. So there's others that are real Ban. Who's the Neshama of real Ban? That's not Ban of Ma. I don't remember right now. Chanoich. He also went up with his body. It says in places, not my guess.
He's saying about him a very unbelievable thing, that he was from Olam HaBei.
We say that about Bela Lipska too. I'm just kidding.
He said that Moshe was humbled when he saw these neshamas.
And that doesn't. By the way, neshama the ban, nachn shtap, Eliyahu is also a ganz fine soul. It's just different roles. They're souls that ikar avidasim. It says ikar avidasim, ikar b'nishmasam. What's the expression here?
The evil was 12 months.
Ikram hu b'chizem. Evdi Hashem b'nishmasam. Okay, so let's explain this. I explained it, but I want to just elaborate again. Just to remember, throughout Chassidus, you constantly find a similar theme. There are many roles to play. So there's no such thing as one level, that's it. And that's the superior level. Everything has its role to play. Remember, there's a purpose. God wants a structured existence, and He wants this structured existence that feels itself independent to reconnect. What we call Dira b'Tachtenim. Real Tachtenim, and wants it to be a home for the divine. And if you need any example, just look at yourself. We are on our own Avda Bevkeda Nichalei. We do what we want. We have our desires, we have our temptations, our taivas, our sense of self, self-indulgence, self-interest, self-pleasure, whatever it may be. Purpose of existence is to take yourself and you should harness it to becoming an expression of what you were sent for. You're on a mission. You have a mission that you should be an agent of the divine, not an agent of your own interests. Succinctly put. Clear? And I think we don't need any elaboration. We all know what self-interest is. Everybody knows. Adam Karavetzel Atzmei, Avas Atzmei. This unfortunately doesn't need any books to explain self-interest. Like the Baditchever said. If you write about Elam Haba, if you give us Elam Haba and write about Elam Haba in the books, then you'd see how we'd behave. Instead, you gave us Elam Haba, and you write about Elam Haba in the Sfarim. Okay, so fine. That's what we are. In this type of birur, you need different forces. You need those that immerse and work in transforming the world. You need those that give direction and tell us more about what the Eir is like. Remember, we talked about interface. I'm talking about the classic interface of Ayin Beis. Let's take Shabbos and the weekdays. Why do we need both? Some people say, why can't we have Shabbos 7 days a week? Not 7, okay, 6 days a week. What do you think? 6 days a week for bringing Shabbos. And one day, God wants us to immerse. Okay, we'll do a little work. We'll shovel some earth. No, Sheishis Yomim. It's 6 days because the Kavanah is not Shabbos. The Kavanah is to transform existence. In a way, the Kavanah is Shabbos. To transform existence, it should be like Shabbos. But that's what the primary work is. But we need 1 day a week to remind us, to somewhat have an oasis, to recharge our batteries, so we can then go back into Chayil and make Chayil Nal Taras HaKedesh. Right? The same. That's in Zman. the same thing in Mokim. You have places that are holy places, a shul, a beis medrash, a beis knesses. And then you have the mundane world. Right? You have a Mokim Kaddish, a Mokim, what do you call it? Mokim Chayil. And here too, the kavanah is to bring the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash, Shachanti B'Seichem, into the Chayil, into the mundane world. Al Pesach Beisei Mibachutz, as we speak about Chanukah. And the same thing is in Nefesh. In Nefesh too, you have souls that are Neshamas the Ma. That's like Shabbos Dik and Neshamas. Their role is to bring light. That's their role. And then you have Neshamas the Ban. Their role is to transform. Their role is to immerse. Now, in truth, like he says in Tanya about Yisachar and Zvulun, about Bali Esek and Mored the what's the expression there? Bali Esek and Bali Mored the Teira, yeah. In truth, everybody has to both learn, daven, and give tzedakah. The question is the primary thing that you're doing. So Yisachar, the people who are involved, the scholars, or Shevet Levi, let's say, there's the of the L'Sharsei. Their main role is to serve God in the Beis HaMikdash. But that's not the whole thing. Most of the nation of Israel are working the fields. Our Zvulun are working in their own work. But you need both. I'm just giving examples of ban in human beings. You need both because one brings the Kedusha in and one transforms. Even though there's overlap, we all have, every morning when we daven, when we learn, is like the Shabbos of the Chayil, relatively speaking. Because we all need it. But then there's general distinctions of those that we'll call the Mored Teira, there's Mored Uvdin Tavin, that's the expression, of Gutta Maisim Tevin. So the Neshamas is Neshamas. So now he's saying, what is Bnei Shushalayim? Gam Yeshleim Bnei Shushalayim is Neshamas of Ban. Why? Because there, Ikram, the Neshamas of Ma, Ikram Hum B'china Zah Datzilis. And that's Ayin Be'etzem. They are fundamentally from Zah, and their Ayin Be'etzem, their personality is one of Bittul, complete Bittul. And when they descend below, they're not that manifest. They're not manifest in Geshem. Their primary thing is revealing the soul. He actually says they're called Banim Lamokim, not Bnais, daughters, Banim, the sons. And then there's higher levels where they're actually called Achim, brothers and friends. So there's a lot of levels in souls itself.
And the highest one is Ma, that whole group.
No, Ma in general is this. Ma in general are Banim Lamokim. And that itself, there's levels of Achim, Reim. Banim is still a child of, so it's like you could say a lower level, Zah. Ach would be like a brother, he's on the same level. Different levels of Elikus. Yeah. Neshama is the Ban, Hem Shem B'chinas Malchus, Hem B'chinas Yesh, K'ma Shem Be'ibur B'chinas Malchus, HaBitzel B'chinas Bitl HaYesh. Because once something is an Ibur, you can't call it Bitl Metzias already. Because even though it's just still maybe just a small fetus, but you can't say it doesn't exist. There's something now that is not the mother anymore. So in Malchus, you already have a state that is no longer pure Atzilus, let's say. It's already the birth of something. It's still within Atzilus, but it's the birth of something that will soon become a full-blown separate entity. So it's still Bitl HaYesh. That's Neshamas Abam. That's Bnei Shushalayim. And they are Nitfas B'Geshem. These souls, when they'll come down, they will actually be like the child in the mother's womb. They will be separate entities. Which is why Moshe's pregnancy was only 7 months and Eliyahu's was 12 months. Now, you're going to say the question is, one second, but Moshe also went through pregnancy. He also went through Malchus. But like we spoke with the express train, he didn't assume the properties as much as Neshama Deban. Obviously, Moshe was also a body. People saw him. You can't say he was not in the Gashmizdika world. But he was the minimum of Gashmis. Now think of it like almost like I remember sometimes seeing the Rebbe at the end of Yom Kippur, you could almost see the glow. There was skin there, but it was such translucent skin, that you could almost see like the glow of light. You sometimes see someone so refined, so there's a body there, but it's like barely. It's almost like a gentle, you know what I mean? It's like light, but it's in the shape of a body, so to speak. Am I the only one that saw this? Maybe you have to have the right eyes.
Most of the right seat.
Yeah. So bottom line is, so of course Moshe also went through Ibur, and therefore also went through Gashmis, but not Nitfas Begeshem. That's the point. And these neshamas do go. One second. Let me just. And so I'm reading it. Because their main work, and that's their main work, is bittul gufam, a transformation of the body, and that's what Bnei Yisrael neshamas neshamas. Yeah. Okay. So this is Bnei Yisrael. What were you going to ask me?
So like Eliyahu would be like the ultimate Baal Tshuva, and Moshe was like the ultimate tzaddik, that type of thing, because he went through everything. Like a Ban has to.
I don't know if ultimate is the right word. Comparatively speaking, Moshe's role was bringing light, and Eliyahu's role was to transform matter. Fine, that's your words. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily use those words here. It's an element of that, because even a person who's not about tshuva, tzaddik also, there's a tzaddik that has to transform the body, and one that doesn't. Baal tshuva implies going off leaving Yiddishkeit. Implies something that's a negative, leading to power. This is not a negative. This is just more manifest in material. Eliyahu was a tzaddik. It's two tzaddikim. Yeah, that's another dimension, right? Exactly. Yeah. Right. He says, Now we can explain why it's called Bnei Yerushalayim. Because that's Yerushalayim, the Shamas of Ban. That's the second explanation, which doesn't contradict the first, because the first is also, it's more Kalim. The first one, the emphasis is the Kalim of Malchus. So it's Yerushalayim, Yira. Here the emphasis of Ban, it's a little more specific. But it's the same idea, conceptually. And he says, and this is where you can say Bnei Yerushalayim, Shcheda Niva Nova. Because if they're not Bnei Yerushalayim, they did not go through this pregnant stage of Malchus. They don't have Kalim or Neshamas the Ban. You can't say Shcheda. Where's their darkness? The Neshama of Ma, like he says, the Neshama of Ma ain't shaykh in Shchedani. Ma Hashem become b'dasa, because even when they come down below, they remain ayin. They're in a state of bittul. So you can't call them darkened. And a soul like that never really assumed any of the garments and the filters and the layers of through the levels. So you can't say Shchedani. You can only say that on the levels of Bnei Yerushalayim. Okay. So now we have Bnei Yerushalayim, Shcheda Niva Nova, Bnei Yerushalayim. So the two interpretations. Now he continues to explain the difference now between the soul as it's in Yerushalayim, Bnei Yerushalayim, and Malchus, and how it now comes down. We're talking now either the souls that are connected to containers, which really would be everybody, even Moshe Rabbeinu, frankly, in a certain way, and the Shamas the Ban, which in that sense relates that now this soul now comes down into the world. It's now leaving the pregnancy stage. What happens now to the soul as it leaves the gestation in Malchus and now becomes a soul on earth? So it says, the souls as they are above, we're talking even Ban, and even the Shamas as they are in Malchus, the Kalim, they're still Bnei Yerushalayim. They're in a revealed way, the daughters of Yerushalayim. They have begun to become an independent entity, which will later emerge. But they're still they're still within the womb of Atzilus. And that's Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, Shleimus HaYira. They have complete awe. We explained how they can have awe because they're already a separate entity. But they're still within the waters of Atzilus. Like we'll soon see. They're still Alma Discassia. They're like fish in water. A child in its mother's womb is like a fish in water. However, it's a fish. Then there's going to come how it becomes outside, how it leaves and it comes onto land, so to speak. So here he says like this. Okay, Tachas here. And this is even superior to angels. Because Malachim, even though they have bittul, but Yosim Tohala, we said. You can say angels a negative thing. Of Kula Matat. That they actually lashed Matat. So the angels because they don't have their bittul is not ultimate. They're not total selfless. But Malchus liyoysa lekus mamash har yunikri Yerushalayim shebchin shleimus hayiru ava bittul. Right, and then he goes on and says, "Ima yesha Malchus b'chinas yesh," and even though Malchus is in a state of yesh, like we said before, it's a fetus, spiritually speaking, not like Chachma, which is complete bittul. And that's why David was bar nafla. David was a what do we call him? It was not miscarried. That he would have been born stillborn. Why? Because his malchus doesn't have the total bittul, and you need bittul to be able to exist. Nevertheless, it's still complete bittul hayeshes legamri. So it's not the bittul like Chachma, which doesn't even have a fetus. There's nothing there. So David, had he not get the years that Adam gave him and the others gave him, he would have not been able to come out of the womb because he didn't have the proper bittul. It's already a shtikl yesh. It needs the energy from above. But on the other hand, it's still in a state of bittul because it's still inside the womb and still part of Atzilus in that sense. Okay. And this state, the soul is in a form of purity from all states of so-called ego. So it's a subtle difference, but remember, we're talking here a fetus, so it's not born yet. On the other hand, it is already substance. So you have here a state where it's in between. It's still bound to its source, in this case Atzilus and the bittul of it, but you can't call it no yesh. You can't say it doesn't exist. It exists, but it is completely bottled. I'm wondering why only David was a bar nafla then. Everybody should be.
The ones that didn't get the extra years, we don't hear about them.
Now, why was he the only one that was a bar nafla? He was a bar nafla because tachlis habitl.
And what does it serve to be a bar nafla?
It serves to show that if you start disconnecting, the chiddush is like this. I'm finding the right words. To be like Moshe, to be Chachma, so you're completely bottle. But on the other hand, you're not a separate entity. So it's beautiful, but you're not. David represents already a separate entity, but because he's so pure, he can't really live on its own. Because a separate entity without a connection to God it doesn't have any, does not have any, what's the word I want, vitality. So therefore, David is representing Malchus, and he's going to become a force that's supposed to bring godliness into this world. But because he has to enter into the world, it doesn't have enough energy to survive. So if it's Chachma doesn't have a problem, because Chachma is not ever separating itself. Let's put it this way. A fetus is very fragile, right? Something goes wrong, God forbid, and it's over with. But what's necessary to be able to give birth to a healthy child that can come and do mitzvahs in this world? It'd be far easier if you stayed beyond the state of a fetus and just b'chokhmah. A spiritual entity never has to go through the fragile, vulnerable states of a fetus developing. But that's not the kavanah. So David represents the ultimate fetus, so to speak. He's coming to be Malchus of Atzilus, to become the Yeredim Biyah. So there's a state of very fragile state. Because on one hand, it's already outside of the source. On the other hand, it's a very divine place. So will it hold? That's why David, had he not gotten the power from Zah, which would be from Adam and from Chachma rather, and from Zah, and then Malchus less l'magar klum. Malchus is a very, very fragile and vulnerable place. It's like the moon. Will my contract be renewed with the sun? But so you say, why do we need it? Because you don't have that, you're not going to have a child. You're not going to have the next level of Biyah. Chachma Vatzilus can't go into Biyah. Chachma Vatzilus is too holy and too detached. Does not have any substance. So you understand? So it's like a substance that's necessary, but it's in that in-between place. Will it hold? So David on his own, because it's the paradox is David has bittul and no bittul at the same time. What do I mean? No bittul. He has bittul. That's why he can't hold. But he has no bittul because he's already becoming an independent entity that doesn't have anything. What gives it vitality? That's the question. So it's not because he was a yesh that he didn't have life. It's because he's so fragile and he's already outside of the source. That's what it comes down to.
At that point.
No, it's the opposite. It's not bittul mitzias because bittul mitzias is chokhmah. It's a yesh, but it's very fragile yesh. It doesn't have anything to keep it going.
No connection.
Well, until he gets those years, then he has the connection. It's like les lamaga maklum. Machlus has nothing of its own.
So what's the difference now between, as you mentioned, the other neshamas?
I guess because David embodies that concept of malchus, where the rest of us develop more coarseness. We're more coarse, so our yeshes holds us. He could not be a yesh really. He's not a yesh, but he's also outside of the source. So what do you do? Take a pure soul and throw it outside where it doesn't have the nurturing. It can't survive.
So
we could survive because we're not that sensitive.
So he's somewhere between Moshe and Eliyahu, something exactly between.
He's the ultimate neshama of Ban, probably David, to be honest. Because Ban is Malchus. Yeah.
Oh, well, Eliyahu is Ban
I mean,
of
at
Ma.
the end of the day, you can say
Ban
no,
of Ma. He's ultimately just Ban.
So you cannot say he's just one.
What?
No, I don't think so.
No?
Because Malchus, in a way, presents the note Tchilos and B'Seifim is the source of the sources at the bottom. So he represents probably the connection between the top and the bottom, like
He's right in between. Like Eliyahu and everybody else, most people are Ban of Ma. That's what everything's Ban of Ma.
You have to say pshat like this. You go back to chapter 161 that he refers to. It's actually a very elegant concept. In other words, you see, God forbid, what happens, God forbid, if a newborn, a new conceived child in its first, second month is expelled from the womb? Cannot survive. Even with technology today. Right? Before it became a fetus, so whatever it was. But it was all completely in a spiritual state. Now that it's becoming an entity, you need to have enough for it to have viability. It needs to have something now. It needs to be sustained. Because it's now, you've thrown it out, it's already outside, it's no longer just in source, it's already becoming developing, but it hasn't yet taken enough, it hasn't gotten enough to be able to exist in the world. That's David in Ruchnius. He's being sent through Malchus. He's Malchus. So it's already a state of Yesh. But not Yesh nicht ego. We mean Yesh as a substance, a state of pregnancy. He's going to become a leader. So he's less. So you really need both elements. By the way, this explains the whole idea with the Mirat HaLevana. What did Levana say? The Levana said you can't have two kings with one crown. 2 crowns on one king. So Levana had to go and diminish itself. That diminishing has a quality and a negative. The negative of it is now it's in a diminished state and it's vulnerable. But the positive of it now can enter a world of diminishment and reconnect. That's the point. David HaMelech is that state. So he's dependent on... If the fetus was able to survive, it would show that it's a grabazach. Because it has already its own substance. David was not that way. He was an Eidela. Refined. Anyway, the point is, I think this review is very important because this chapter, without this, okay. So now we have the neshamas like that. So but they're still in pregnancy. So while they're in pregnancy, everything is fine. I'm reading at the top of 362. However, when they descend below, then so now they're no longer like fish in the water. Now they're Alma Dizgalia, they become separate from their source. And on this period in time, here, Alzman Yididus and Neshama Lamata, Alzen Nemer Shcheirani. This is a critical line. And in this period of time that the soul descends below, that's what we say, Shcheirani, I am dark. Sheimeres HaNeshama Shalamata El HaNeshama K'mayshi Hilamayla. This is what the soul below is saying to the soul the way it's above. Kedim Islapshusa Beguf. It's like, think of it like the child outside of the mother's womb is speaking to the soul as it was in the womb, or, right? Yeah. Hagam d'shcheirani b'chineshachlis v'salmas eir. Even though I am dark, in the darkness and concealment of the light. And then he goes on now, explains, Umagam. Moreover, through my manifesting in a body and animal soul, so it gets concealed, the light, and it gets distant from its source. And then he goes, the rest of the chapter is explaining to the extent of the effort and exertion necessary to achieve Yira. This is what the soul is saying. So he doesn't feel it's the Hagam, by the way. He just starts. The whole thing is the Hagam. Then in this chapter, we're going to learn he feels it. So what is he saying? I'll just sum up what he says the rest of the chapter. So he says that the soul as it's now in a body, in this world, is speaking to the soul as it was in its womb. In Malchus, Bnei Yerushalayim, listen, Shcheirani, I'm dark, I'm concealed, and for me to reach Yerushalayim, Bnei Yerushalayim is very difficult. And he explains two reasons it's so difficult that we need the exertion. So I'll just sum up. One is because in order to achieve awe in this world, it's not just sufficient to have a contemplation like for Ava. Love, if you contemplate and you appreciate and you comprehend the divine, you can be attracted to it. I'm attracted to the spirituality of the divine, to its superiority, its beauty. Then there's a long parenthesis where he talks about, going back to what he spoke about in chapter 171, does the contemplation itself feel godliness, or the godliness comes afterwards? There's a whole parenthesis which we reviewed. And he spoke about it in the different options. That depending, is the seichel, is the comprehension dominant? Then the divine sense of the divine comes afterwards. Or if the sense of the divine, then it comes right away. And he said this is the difference if it's primis hasoga or chechenis, if it's an intimate type of comprehension, then you appreciate the divine right away. If it's more superficial, it will come afterwards. Then he spoke to the difference between a subtle type of comprehension, even if it's superficial, but it's subtle. You can also come to it quicker. The bottom line is, all this is how one achieves love. The difference is also whether you're talking about godliness is good, or is it good for me? She speaks of a whole bunch of levels, which we discussed, of how one comes to it, whether they come to it immediately or they come to it later, whether the focus is on the intelligence of it or on the feeling of it. But when it comes to awe, the soul is saying that's much more difficult, because awe you need to also have more. You need also some form of some recognition. What's that? Familiarity, you can say, yeah. So we're not talking about, he says here, in a complete, like seeing it, but you need to have, to be in awe, you must relate to it more. By Ava, you can have yesh misha'ayiv. You can be me, and I am attracted to something. By Yira, even though there's a state of also yesh, me, once someone has awe, but general Yira is far more bittul. Because it's awe. So and that requires more, and that's why it's so difficult. That's why it's so difficult to reach this recognition, this state of familiarity, this state of relating to the divine. And the second reason it needs Yigiyah, because you have to refine the coarseness of this world, the chumri. And that's what makes it so difficult. So now let's continue chapter 178. We continue. So bottom line is, Shcheira Nivanova is all coming to explain what the soul is saying. I am dark in this world, and Yerushalayim, Yira, does not come easy. So we can all relate to this chapter, right? So now in chapter Kufayin Ches, he continued, V'zeo sha'imeres haneshama lamata. And this is what the soul below says, Dagam, the Shcheira, he now goes back to the Hagam. That even though I am darkened, M'kol mokim v'nava, and nevertheless I am beautiful. I am beautiful. The Herst, it can make you cry, right? I'm still beautiful. Shaydei yiridasu lamata, because through its descent below, nasa ba yisrin maila. An advantage, a quality, a feature. Nasaba was infused in it, was created in it, was made. How would you say Nasaba? Nasaba Yisrael.
It was made.
Through its descent below, Nasaba, it assumed a new quality, a superior quality to what the soul is before. Yeah, achieved. See, Nasaba is more than achieved. Nasaba means it's like in it. It assumed, it learned, it adapted Nasaba. It's like someone with experience gained a superior quality. Yeah, that's it. It gained a superior quality. Because through the soul becoming a separate entity on its own, and it binds itself to the divine. Now this connection, this bond, is in a state of thirst, and a yearning. An awesome, increasingly powerful state of yearning. And this is what a soul below, why a soul below is called the name of Kala, bride. Shuloshin Kaloyan. What's Kala? Kaloyan means to expire. Like when you say Kaloyan ha'esh, Kaloyan ha'etzim. Something is dissolving.
Kol
Sanafshi, yeah. What?
Oh,
it means to rise, it means to expire, it means to be bought, yeah. It's Kaloyan really comes from the word, is mostly here, in this case it's more the thirst he's talking about, the yearning, Kaloyan, like reaching upward. Like he says, kol sanafshi, my soul expired. My soul, it's like when a soul senses something really powerful and it just expires in ecstasy. Koloyan has many meanings. Koloyan can mean annihilating. The koloyan of something, like when the fuel, the wood, nichla ha'etz, the wood becomes consumed. Right, consumed is also a good word. But here he doesn't mean koloyan in a negative way. He's not talking about koloyan like, destruction. He's not talking about destruction. He's talking here absorption, consumption, consumed.
What happened with koloyan and nefesh? That the nefesh is
expiring in ecstasy, in its joy, or yeah. Well, when a song touches you deeply, or something happens that touches you deeply, and your soul just like is drawn to it, you lose yourself, basically. But the point I want to make, it's not a negative losing; it's positive. It's not someone, God forbid, koloyan as in, you could say koloyan also on the genocide and destruction. You destroy people.
It's like somebody, the chassan and kala, chassan goes down and the kala goes up.
Yeah. The dafke lamata ha'ava v'arotza b'chinas koloyan. Dafke lamata. Why isn't neshama lamata called kala? Because only specifically below is where the love and the yearning is in a state of koloyan, in a state of kala, in a state of absorption. I would say dissolving into. Kaloyin is also a yearning. Kaloyin, when kolsa nafshi is when there's a word in English, pining, to pine for something. We have gaguyim, chuke, tzimoyin, kolsa. It has commonalities between all those. B'bchinas rishpei eish, hachuke v'tzimoyin b'yeser, in the form of rishpei eish, sparks. Rishpei. Ava kerishpei eish. Rishpei or kerishpei? Rishpei. Rishpei? Rishpei? But what's the actual makir? What's the shadish of Rishpei? Reshef? What's meant this? Flame.
No, not flame.
Sparks. Rishpei eish. Rishpei eish. I think the Rebbe would say Rishpei. Kahavi kerishpei. Maybe not. Maybe Rishpei. Questions. The sparks of fire, hatshuke v'atzemoyim b'yeser, in a yearning and an increased yearning and thirst.
Rabbi Rashab is describing it. He knew it.
The kamoishi l'mayla she'ein nifredes b'mekeda, because the way the soul is above, where it's not separate from its source. V'adarabah him yuchedes tamid b'mekeda. On the contrary, it's entirely united, consistent. It's continuously united in its source. It has none of this type of yearning. It doesn't have this aspiration. Rather, it's only when the soul comes down below. Because when it's connected, a fish in water doesn't look for water. It's when the fish is outside of water that is desperate for nourishment. The problem is, what happens if you're stuck in the Shcheirani and on the Nova, and you don't feel this kaloi? That's what I want to know. This is nice. This is at least the soul is yelling, it's dark and I am beautiful. Okay.
This is on a higher level.
Yeah.
No, you get a chukka for the wrong thing. You have chukka.
I need to talk to Abba Avram. What happens if Shcheira under Venova? Is there? You're familiar with that situation? Huh? Okay. The Wilde Rebbe is a bisschen niedriger to the Shcheire under Venova. What's going on, right? Okay. V'zeu shebeshir hashirim, and this is what in Shir Hashirim, in the Song of Songs, and this is where these psukim are from. Kala. Shcheira ani Venova is from Shir Hashirim.
Yeah.
Nemar kama pomim achesi kala. He's now explaining when Shir Hashirim says a number of times the words achesi kala, my sister, my bride. My sister, the bride. Bas legani achesi kala. And there's more, a number of times. Achesi kala rayosi. Yeah, there's a bunch of expressions. Why? What is the expression achesi kala? Because in the souls of Israel there's two levels. So we already have brothers, friends, bonim, sons. Now we're talking about sisters and brides. The level of achesi and kala. Kiyesh ma'ila b'achesi. There's an advantage of a sister, b'achesi, the level of my sister. The ach v'achesi kidavar echad. A brother and sister are like one thing. V'avosim hitmidis, and the love is forever, perpetual or forever. Tmidis would be here forever, constant. Yeah, constant.
Sibling love is forever.
It's constant. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to call my sister today. Sisters, tell her what I just read. I said it says.
She'll say it about
He reminded you.
Yeah.
Was it weiter, the Bekrirus?
Cha'avihi b'krirus. But the love is not flaming, passionate. It's a what he means krirus here, by the way. It doesn't mean that. He means krirus means it's passive. It's cold. Krirus literally means cold, but he means. Nein, nicht wie du meinst.
Ve'ein b'zeh is
Ve'ein b'zeh is chachus.
I can
Yeah.
fly, hopefully.
There's no challenge. There's no resistance. Because it's there. I mean, I'm explaining.
What does his conscious mean?
Bond. But Neschach is new. There's no novelty.
No.
There's no novelty. Bekridus means it's cool. It's a cool love.
And on the other hand,
Steady but constant. Kala.
The kala harizekadova nifrit. Kala is a bride, someone you've chosen. You're not a biological brother or sister. It's a separate. Harizekadova nifrit. That's like a separate thing. It's like he says kidova nifrit. Interesting. It's not really separate. It's kid. And you're feeling it's like a separate thing because it's a stranger initially. Va'ava ain't midis, and the love is not constant. The yochel is okay. I have to call my wife now. I have a bunch of calls to make.
Your sister, your wife.
No, maybe you call your sister, because you always have constant. Maybe you shouldn't call your wife.
Va'ava ain't midis, and it's not constant. The yochel is hefsek chas v'shalom, and there can be a break, God forbid.
What is not good?
A break or a hefsek also means a stop. Interruption. God forbid. U'kamay bezman ha'golos shenadunu b'shluchin v'gerishin. Ooh, fits the 3 weeks, 9 days. Like as man ha'golos, we were judged, we were punished basically. Nadunu, they were nadun is the verdict. We were what do we call it? Verdictized. How do you say when you were sentenced? Naduna, they were sentenced b'shluchin v'gerishin, to be sent away and to be divorced.
Let's go.
It's an expression from Gemara, Mamashur, right? It sounds like an expression from the Gemara.
Shiluchin, I think, no? Shiluchin.
B'shiluchin v'gerishin. B'shiluchin v'gerishin.
Sent away.
You're sentenced to be sent away and to be banished.
Wow.
Shenaduna b'shiluchin v'gerishin. Does it loshen in Chazal wegen Beis Chud Beis HaMikdash, or could be even Golus? Yeah.
Kids, it's understood. I hear it was a mile.
Achiyash b'zamayla, nevertheless, however, in this, the kala, there's an advantage. Ha'ava hi berish be'esh. This love is like sparks, fireworks. Fireworks is a good word. What's your marriage like? Fireworks. Lebedik and Freilich.
You have to call your wife. And don't bother calling your sister.
Berish be'esh. Zeu b'izgalus pnimis hanefesh yeser. And this is in a state of inner revealed state of the soul, increasingly yeser, a more revealed inner state of the soul, and it reaches higher in a higher place.
It's not Kirill's.
That's for sure. And through this is a chadash, and through this you draw down a new energy. Interesting, because the love of your brothers and siblings, love, there's no chiddush in it, so you don't draw down anything new. Here, because it's separate, or seems separate, and it requires this, and it's there could be, God forbid, the opposite, a negative, a separation. You can't divorce your brother and sister. You can't separate from them. So because of that, it inspires and awakens a flaming passion. That he speaks on several levels. First of all, it's more Zgalas Pnimis HaNefesh Yosef. Your soul is more revealed, it's more intimate in your soul because it's coming from a deeper inner place. It reaches a higher place, and the third thing, it draws down something new, a novelty, something that wasn't there before.
So Moshe didn't have any of these things. He was always like up there. He didn't get any.
That's exactly what I told you. Tanya says the battle is the kavanah. God wants the battle. Matamim. He wants the battle. Yeah.
That's why he had.
What did the Tzemach Tzedek? What did the Tzemach Tzedek? What did the Tzemach Tzedek say to the man? He came to Rebbe. What can I do? I don't want to learn. And Tzemach Tzedek said, "What could I do? I do want to learn."
He said, "I'm jealous."
Yeah, I'm jealous of you. He said, "Because I do want. I have no struggle. You know." You hear? The bederach klal b'chinas hachesi u'b'chinas yichud chetzeni dava. He's bringing it back to the ovis. In general, the level of my sister, is the level of an outer unity of Abba ve'ima, Chachma Bina. The Kala b'chinas yichud pnimi dava. And Kala is a level of inner unity of Abba and Imma Kamesha Kasma, like it says elsewhere. So this would connect it to what we learned about the Av as being Yichud Chitzeni of Abba ve'Imma, and the Matan Torah, which was Chosn Kala. Now Yom Chasan Nosei would be Yichud Pnimi, and that brings the Er Chodesh. If you remember all the way back, yeah, that's very good. That fits very well. Here, all the way here, chapter 134 talks about the two types of Yechudim. Yichud Chidush Yishenus and Chidush Mamish. Yeah, that was good. If you're going by here, give me another battery here. One of the blue batteries here in the corner. Oh, thank you. Still going. Okay, you know what? Let me just change. Okay, let me see. We'll see where we're going here. So we have the two Yechudim. Fine. Now, seemingly, Hayisin has Sheben B'Ridas Lamata. So now we have established Shchira Nivanova Dafka below where it's dark, and the possibility of a disconnection. And it is disconnected. You come to a deeper tzimay, and it's not just more thirst and yearning. It's actually a deeper pshacha chodesh. He says now seemingly Hayisin has this advantage, this quality, this level. Shanashama B'Ridas Lamata. Sheba Neshama, that's in the soul as it comes down, descends below. Hubchinas Ava, Hubchinas Ava. It's only in the level of Ava. Ava b'Yira, but in Yira, Hayisun Yesem Neshama K'Mashir L'Mayla. So this level is not in Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim. In Ava, you come to a deeper love below. But in Yira, seemingly there's a greater advantage the way it is above. V'Hainu Kanal, as we spoke earlier, Sha'Yira Ikra B'chinas Kakoros. Like we spoke earlier, that Yira requires more effort, because Yira is a state of Hakaras HaMahus, a recognition, a familiarity of the personality of the thing you're in awe of. And this level is... I'm sorry. This level is in the soul above the Mazlayo Chazi, because your mazel sees. Your mazel senses. Your mazel means the Sheirish Neshama. The soul senses it. This actually, the expression is used by Daniel, where they came and they stood there and they suddenly started to shudder. Why? So it said, I don't see anything, but my mazel sees. So he's using this now here, that Yira is far more above, because that's where there's Hakara. Omnam Yeshlema, so that would be seemingly, L'cheira. So Omnam, however, Yeshlema, we can say that Kasher Aidei that when through effort and exertion, he comes to a state of awe. There's also in this advantage, not just in Av, in love, but also in Yira below. The bittul is by putting yourself completely aside. And this is increasingly more by the soul as it's a separate entity. Like it's similar to what is explained elsewhere. The expression Einaid means there's nothing else, and Kula Kamei means everything is nothing compared to you. That bitlish b'chinas eir hu b'chinas kala. Eir, light and energy is in a state of kala. It's nothing. It's completely nullified in the presence of its source. That bitl the Einaid, the sense of there's nothing but God, hu b'chinas yesh dafke, is much more sense than a yesh. This needs explanation. Because you see, Eir is a natural. Like we spoke before about brother and sister. Eir is naturally nullified in the presence of it. It's like in the way of Kriris in a way. It doesn't need any effort. It's naturally subjugated to its source. It's something as a yesh b'fnei atzmei can tell you more about the divine, because Einaid, there's nothing but God. Eir can tell you, I'm naturally bound to God, and therefore I'm nothing. But you can't say there's nothing but God, because outside of Eir could say, I'm nothing, but I don't know outside of me. Maybe there are things that are something. But when a yesh is batel, it says no, there's nothing but God. So he's saying that's an advantage. So the yirah, if you talk about a more powerful awe, obviously there's more recognition of the divine in higher levels than lower levels. So there's Yerushalayim is higher. But if you're talking about the Hanochas Hatzmuz, that I'm completely nullified, is deeper below because it's a complete bittul. Because of this effort. That's what he's saying here. Same thing you can say here. The soul above, even though it's in a state of bittul. Subjugated. Its primary subjugation is in the form of nullification. Nothing compared to the source. And it's descent, but it's in the descent, the souls descend below. Where it becomes an entity. The bitl is complete putting myself aside. So we find that the connection of the soul below to godliness, to the divine, has in it a quality compared to the way the soul is above before it descends. Even though there above, it's in a state of unity, here it's in a state of separation, but the separate thing that connects has a quality over a thing that was originally connected. That's what he's saying. We'll stop here because now he's going now into Neshamis L'Gabe Torah.
So it has both miles.
So it's a new.
It has a mile of a kala and a sister or brother.
Not really. It doesn't have the mile of Achesi really here.
But you said Achesi Kala.
So he didn't explain that, but it means that probably there's two things.
That has that.
Well, how does it have the first one? How does it have Achesi? It's separate. It doesn't have that. He didn't talk about it. He could explain it in some ways, but he didn't discuss it. Let's stop here. So we did a review of chapter 177 in detail, and the first half of 178, page 363.